Hey there everybody, welcome back to Bench Proof. My name is David. Today we're going to be making a very simple white plain sandwich loaf of bread. We're going to be working with yeast today, which we did not do in the first episode, so I'll go over a couple little tips and tricks to make sure that you get the best rise out of your yeast, make sure that your water is the right temperature and things like that. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and get right into it. In my bowl here, I've already got 2 cups of all-purpose flour. And to that, we're going to add 1/4 cup of powdered non-fat dry milk. What this does is it adds more protein to your bread without having to increase fat content by adding flour or lard or anything like that. So it makes your bread a little bit more rigid and a little bit stronger without having to go to use bread flour or anything like that. We're also going to add 3 tablespoons of sugar and 2 teaspoons of salt. That's not only going to add flavor to your bread, but it's also going to be the food that your yeast is going to use to help your bread to rise, because they need something in there that they can eat on and then produce the gas which causes your bread to rise, makes that CO2. So I'm just going to kind of stir that a little bit to combine, make sure it's all through my flour. And then I'm going to add 1 packet of active dry yeast. You can use rapid rise if you want to. I've just found that active dry gives me a better rise and a more consistent rise over multiple loaves of bread. Active dry just seems to be a little bit better as far as quality goes over the long term, from what I've found. Next, we're going to add 2 cups of hot water, and I've put this in the microwave for about 2.5 minutes. You're going to want to test it though. It needs to be warm so that your yeast can get reactivated, and that helps to dissolve the sugars and things like that so they can start to eat those sugars and start the rising process. Now keep in mind, most municipalities have added chlorine to their tap water for safety purposes. That helps keeps it clean for us to drink and keeps microbes out and things like that. However, with the chlorine being added in there to keep microbes out, that includes yeast. So chlorine kills yeast. So always filter your water with a pitcher filter or a system on your sink coming out of your faucet. They make those that runs your entire system, or buy bottled water. Whatever you do, do not use tap water though. The chlorine will kill your yeast. You will get no rise. You remember those old drug commercials back in the day? Well, here you go.
All right, this is your yeast. This is your yeast on tap water. Get the point?
Alright, now that we've got that out of the way, we've got our hot water here, and like I said, it's 2 cups. In this 2 cups, I've also put 3 tablespoons of vegetable shortening, and I put those in there with the water as it heats up in the microwave. That just kind of melts the shortening down so that it's much easier to incorporate into the what's really a batter now, what will be a dough in a little bit. I find it easier to incorporate melted shortening rather than room temperature shortening or solid shortening or anything like that, just because really all we need is the fat to coat the flour granules, and it's still fat even when it's melted. And excuse me, and it goes in much easier. So now that that's all relatively combined, yes, there's a few lumps and things like that still, but that'll all work out in the end. What we're going to do is going to start adding flour. Like I said, we had 2 cups in there to start with. We're going to wind up with about 5 to 6 cups. And the amount of flour that you're going to use is going to vary day to day. You can make this exact same loaf of bread every single day of the week, and you could use completely different amounts of flour every single day of the week. What matters is the temperature that you're using, that you're making your bread at, the humidity outside, a whole bunch of different variables. So that's why the 5 to 6 cups of flour, it's really going to depend on what it's going to be like in your own kitchen when you're making this at home. So I've just added 1 more cup of flour, because I do know that we're going to need at least that. You're going to start stirring it around until it gets incorporated. As more and more flour goes into your dough, it's going to take longer and longer for that flour to get completely incorporated into the dough, so take your time. It's going to take a while anyways, because you're going to be working with this dough for quite a little while to make sure that you form the gluten. So this isn't like a pancake batter or a waffle batter where you want to stir it a couple times just to get it relatively incorporated and then walk away. We actually want that gluten, so just go ahead and just keep stirring, make sure that everything is incorporated in there. I just added 1 more cup of flour, because like I said, just looking at it, having made this in the past, I know that I'm going to need at least this much. This gets us up to 4 cups total right now. As you can see, it's getting harder to incorporate because the flour has less moisture to suck up from the dough, because a lot of the flour that's in there is already starting to soak up the moisture from the dough. So like I said, it takes longer to incorporate, but still needs to get incorporated almost completely before you add your next batch, because while you want to make sure there's enough flour in there that it is able to take out all the moisture out of the dough that it can and get completely absorbed in there, you don't want too much because you still want it to be kind of sticky before you turn it out to be able to start to work it by hand. So I've got 4 cups in there. I'm going to add another ½ cup, incorporate that, and we'll see where it looks after this. It's actually starting to look about the point where I'm going to turn it out and start to knead it by hand. I think I might add about another ¼ cup of flour here, just because it's still a little on the tacky side. So I think I'm going to add about 1/4 to another ½ cup, give or take, into there. Incorporate that in there, stir that around, and then after this we'll probably start to work it by hand. Alright, so I think that's about as good as we're going to get in the bowl. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move that aside, taking about a ½ cup of flour and put it out on my work surface here. I'll spread it around a little bit. Get some flour in your hands. That'll help to reduce the sticking of the dough, directly onto your hands. So I always flour my hands when I'm working with dough. And then just take it out of the bowl and start to work it on the table. Let me get this out of the way so you maybe get a better look at this. Right, and then basically what you're going to do is you're going to just do fold in half and then just push. It's a push-pull motion that you're going to be wanting to do. I rotate it counterclockwise while I do that. So I push and pull, do a little bit of a spin, push and pull, little bit of a spin. However you want to do it, it's completely up to you. The main thing is just to make sure that you incorporate the flour into the dough. You want all the stickiness gone by the time you get done kneading this. And you want to knead it enough that you form that gluten that we were talking about earlier on in the video. That's what's going to give you strength in your bread. That's what's going to form the cell structure. It's kind of like it's going to form the grids that your bubbles are going to attach onto, and then that's what's going to cause your bread to rise and things like that. So you've got 2 different compounds in the bread right now. You've got glutenin and gliadin, which once through agitation and heat, they form gluten. So that's what the kneading process is for. It takes quite a while. If you have a food processor, not a food processor, a stand mixer with a dough hook attachment, feel free to use it. Just turn it on. You're going to want to do it on about medium speed for about 5 minutes or so. Should probably be good for this loaf and for the type of RPMs and the type of kneading that you're going to get from a stand-up mixer. I myself am poor and do not have one of those, so I do it by hand. It takes about 15 minutes to knead it to the level that it needs to be at. Obviously, I won't make y'all watch the whole thing. I'll skip forward. But if you have a stand-up mixer, feel free to use it. The purpose for these videos for me is to show that you don't need very fancy kitchen equipment to be able to make good, wholesome, relatively healthy food. Obviously don't go eating bread every single day. Not super great for you to do that, but every once in a while, if you're gonna eat bread, I say eat homemade bread. There's no preservatives in there. There's nothing except the stuff that you put in there. All right, here we go. I've finished my kneading. It took me about 10 minutes today. Sometimes it takes longer, sometimes it takes less time. It's a lot like the flour content. It just really depends on the day and how much, how much liquid the flour granules are able to soak up on that day, and vice versa, how much they're not able to soak up. It just really all depends. This feels pretty good to me. I've made this loaf quite a few times, so I know what it should feel like at this point. Basically, you want it see how like nothing's really sticking at all. It's a fairly dried dough, no real sticking at all. It still tears if you go to pull it. Like, it's not going to be like a pizza dough. It still tears there. But even though it's not exactly like a pizza dough, it's still got that gluten in there. So it's still going to be a relatively strong dough, but we're not looking for a pizza dough. Right now we're looking to make bread dough. So what we're going to do now is move that to the side. You're going to take a large bowl, spray it down with some no-stick spray, and then just toss it in there. That's all there is to it. You're going to cover it up with some plastic wrap, which I despise working with this stuff, particularly on camera, because it always seems to have a way of making an idiot out of you. So we're going to cover this up. This is the first rise. This is going to take an hour. In that time, it'll just about double in volume. So I don't put it on like an airtight seal or anything like that. I put it on so that nothing can get in there. No flies or any little bugs that you might have crawling around your house. I've got dogs, so I open my back door and let him in and out all the time, and stuff flies in. It happens. So I just put this over here to make sure that nothing gets into the bowl while it's there. But like I said, it will double in size in this 1 hour, so make sure there's plenty of room for it to expand. You want to use a big enough bowl that it's got plenty of room to expand. And so we're going to let this rise and check back in on it in an hour. I'll show you what it should look like, and then we'll go on to the next step. Alright, it's been about an hour. This is what our dough looks like now. As you can see, it's much bigger than the dough ball that we initially put into this bowl. Set that off to the side. What you're going to want to do is you're just going to kind of work this just a little bit on some more flour just to get some of the bigger bubbles out. You want the small bubbles there, they're what give you the rise, but the bigger bubbles are just a little bit too much. They're going to give you a really weird texture on the inside of your bread loaf. And then what you're going to want to do is you're going to cut this in half. And then just let it sit for about 2 to 3 minutes. Alright, they've been resting on my bench here for about 2 minutes, and as you can tell, I've formed them into just little balls, which is you just tuck the ends underneath, and that pulls the skin tight on these. Just kind of, that's how I prefer to let them sit. It's up to you, you don't have to. I find it easier to shape them in this next step here if I've already kind of put them into shapes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move those to the side. I'm going to take my two 9 by, what size are you? 9 by 5 or 5 by 9. I just call them the loaf pan. I've got 2 of them because obviously this is going to make 2 loaves. I'm going to spray each loaf pan down. And I use this cooking spray here that already has flour in the spray, made specifically for bakers. That way you don't have to worry about rubbing it with butter, then putting the flour in there and tapping the flour around. It's a hassle. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take each one of my loaves and I'm going to actually form it into a loaf. Just kind of make it an oblong-ish rectangle. Doesn't have to be perfect because now they're going to rise for another 45 minutes. This is the final rise. So it's only an hour and 45 minute total rise time on these. Not very bad for bread at all, guys. Easy to do at home. I'm going to bring my other loaf pan over here. Set them in there. Set them there. I'm going to cover them up with the tea towel. Let them rise for 45 minutes. During this time, turn your oven on to 400 degrees. That's Fahrenheit. I'm in America, so it's 400 degrees Fahrenheit. And then it needs to get to 400 and then stay at 400 for at least about 15 minutes before these go in the oven. What happens is that allows the entire oven to come up to that 400 degrees. The metal walls, the bottom, the top, everything, not just the air inside. So when you open that oven to put your bread in, you're not going to lose all of your heat because the entire mass of the oven has had time to come to that 400 degrees. So the temperature drop won't be near as bad as if you put them in as soon as the oven beeps and says that it's at 400 degrees. So like I said, we're going to cover these up with a tea towel, turn our oven on to 400 degrees, and then we'll come back in 45 minutes, show you what they look like, and then we'll show you the cooking process. All right, guys, it's been 45 minutes, and take off the towel now. As you can tell, they're a good bit bigger. They fill a good majority of the pan now. They haven't, risen all the way up or anything like that, which is perfectly fine. They don't need to be. Mainly, you're just looking for them to fill kind of the gaps and kind of get to the corners. They'll double, not quite double. I'd say these will rise maybe about a third. Again, a third more than what they were at first. Like I said, it's more just kind of filling out the bottom of the pan more than actually rising up. They will rise in the oven. Don't you worry about that. But so now what we're going to do is we're going to move them to the oven. Like I said, the oven is preset at 400 degrees. It's been there for quite a while. That way the whole oven has time to get up to that temperature. After 10 minutes though, without opening the door or anything like that, just drop your oven temperature down to 350 degrees. Your oven will compensate for that automatically. And then, so it's going to be 10 minutes at 400, then drop it down to 350 degrees, and then it's going to be about another 20 to 30 minutes. I normally let mine go for about 25 and then check on them. What you're looking for is a nice golden brown color. And then, obviously, this one you're going to have to actually take them out of the oven to check this. You're going to check for kind of a hollow sound. I'll show you how to check for that later on once they're baked. But for right now, we're going to get them in the oven, and we'll see you once they're done. Alright, welcome back. As you can tell, our bread is out of the oven. Smells delicious. Right there you can see it's got a nice golden brown color to it, and when you thump it, it sounds fairly hollow. What we're going to do is go ahead and turn out a loaf there. I don't know if you can hear that or not through the microphone, but it's got just a hollow thud sound. It doesn't sound very solid at all. That tells you that it's done baking. What I'm going to do is I'm going to let these rest just like this for about 10-15 minutes, and then put them on a cooling rack to finish coming all the way down to room temperature. And then after that, just put them in a Ziploc bag. They freeze very well, so if your family or if you aren't going to go through 2 loaves in the time that it would take this to go stale, you can freeze one of them, bring it back out, slice it into, do slices, pop it in the toaster in the morning, makes great toast. Speaking of going stale, keep in mind these do not have any preservatives or anything like that. They are homemade. You saw everything that went into them, so they will go stale faster than a regular store-bought loaf. So you do want to keep it sealed in an airtight Ziploc container or something like that, because that'll help slow down that staling process. But either way, that's our just regular old sandwich loaf. If you like this video, please hit the like button down below. Subscribe to my channel for more how-to and instructional videos. And thank you very much for watching. Have fun baking.